In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff 'tis made of, whereof 'tis born, I am to learn. And such a want with sadness makes of me, but I have much ado to know myself. Thus spake Antonio, and that is the beginning of The Merchant of Venice, one of William Shakespeare's most performed plays. Some people have classified his plays into comedies, tragedies, tragicomedies, dark comedies. This is a play which is a little different. It cannot very easily be placed into a genre. But there are elements of the tragic comedy in it. And there are several other elements which we shall explore one by one. The first thing about Shakespeare is that he is a poet. All his plays are pure poetry. And in fact, the great Thomas Stearns Eliot, T.S. Eliot, as he is better known, said that the best drama can only be expressed through poetry. Does that mean that every line should rhyme? No. বাংলাতে যেটা আমরা অন্তমিল বলি, সেই অন্তমিলের প্রয়োজন নেই, কিন্তু তবু শেক্সপিয়ারের নাটক কিন্তু কবিতা। Shakespeare writes in blank verse, and the kind of blank verse that he uses is known as iambic pentameter. Now, I think a little discussion about iambic pentameter is important to an understanding of his plays. So he writes in meter. There are specific syllables. In every line there are 10 syllables. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. 10. It wearies me, you say, it wearies you. 10. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it. 10. So can you imagine a man writing 39 plays in his lifetime, apart from several sonnets and poems, every line in iambic pentameter? That is why he's Shakespeare. There are occasions when he breaks out from the iambic pentameter, very rare occasions. Now, when does he do that? He does that for dramatic effect, serious dramatic effect. Example, Lady Macbeth towards her own end, when she is consumed by guilt. She says, all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this hand. It's all in prose. Here in The Merchant of Venice, there will be one speech which will be in prose. So he uses prose for dramatic effect. But the entirety of his drama is in verse. Much like the great Indian poet Michael Madhusudan Dutt. Michael Madhusudan তার মেঘনাদ পদ কাব্য কিন্তু অমিত্রাক্ষর ছন্দে রচনা করেছিলেন। সেখানে অন্তমিল নেই, কিন্তু অভ্যন্তরীণ একটা ছন্দ আছে। সচকিতে বীরবর দেখিলা সম্মুখে, ভীম তমশূল হস্তে, ধূমকেতু সম, খুল্ল তাত বিভীষণ, বিভীষণ রণে। এতক্ষণে অরিন্দম কহিলা বিষাদে, জানিল কেমন আসে লক্ষণ পশিল রক্ষপুরে। তাত উচিত কি তব এ কাজ, নিকষা সতী তোমার জননী, সহোদর রক্ষ শ্রেষ্ঠ, সুরী শম্ভু নেবকুম্ভ কর্ণ, রাত্রি পুত্র বাসব বিজয়ী, নিজ গৃহ পত্তাত দেখাও তস্করে, চণ্ডালে বসাওয়ানি রাজার আলয়ে, কিন্তু নাহি গঞ্জিত গুরুজন তুমি বৃত্তে তুল্য। সর্দার যাব অস্ত্রাগারে, পাঠাইব রামানুজে স্মরণ ভবনে, লঙ্কার কলঙ্ক আজি ভঞ্জিব আহবে। এটা কিন্তু বীর রসে রচিত। অতএব আমার যে অভিব্যক্তি, যদি আপনাদের কখনো মনে হয়ে থাকে এটা চিত্রিত, এটাই ছিল তদানীন্তনকালে উদ্দেশ্য। বীর রসে কথা বলছেন কিন্তু মেঘনাথ। এবং তদানীন্তনকালে আজকের এই পরিপ্রেক্ষিতে ভীষণভাবে প্রযোজ্য বলে আমি মনে করি এমনই একটা রামায়ণের ব্যাখ্যা যেটাকে বলা যেতে পারে অ্যান্টি রামায়ণ। মাইকেল মধুসূদন দত্ত, who was so proficient in Sanskrit, in Bangla, in Greek, in Latin, and of course in English. He also translated the famous Bangla play Neel Darpon as the Indigo Mirror. In Hindi too, blank verse is used a lot. Consider, for example, आ चुका हूं मैं यहां पहले भी, फिर भी ये जगह लगती है अनजानी सी। कुछ ही लम्हे टूट कर गिरे हैं और समय ने गिरगिट की तरह रंग बदल लिया है। तन्हा तन्हा राहें खामोश होकर बढ़ रही है, न जाने कितनी यादें इन राहों से जुड़ रही है। जब इन राहों से होकर इन्हीं राहों को छोड़कर लौट जाएंगे, बीते हुए ये पल उस दिन किसी सपने की तरह आंखों में बस जाएंगे। Blank verse, there is a rhythm, it's not strictly end rhymes. Or even the famous couplets in Urdu, Hindustani. Sahir says, कह दूंगा रोज़े हश्र मैं दावर के रूबरू, कह दूंगा रोज़े हश्र मैं दावर के रूबरू, हाँ किए है गुनाह तेरी रहमत के जोर पर. So that is the culture, and Shakespeare is writing in iambic pentameter. Now to come back to the main story of the merchant of Venice. Antonio is the merchant of Venice who does not know why he is so sad. The play begins on an odd note. You know, he's confused. He's in a dilemma. Now Shakespeare follows certain tenets of Greek theatre methodology. One of them is that coming events cast their shadows before. Meaning that before the actual tragedy or the misfortune happens, there is a hint of it. It's called a foreboding or a presentiment. He is fearing that something evil, something bad is going to happen. Now, he plays the title role. The Merchant of Venice is Antonio, what we call eponymous in theatre parlance. But is he the protagonist? You know, there are many here, including famous director Kamal Raychaudhuri, who played characters in The Merchant of Venice. And Merchant of Venice is not really the story of Antonio, although Antonio is there. The story revolves around him, but there are at least 2 or 3 other characters of equal, if not greater importance than Antonio. Antonio is what Hitchcock would call a MacGuffin. Now what is a MacGuffin? A MacGuffin is a device used in art, primarily in cinema, which sets the plot moving. It has no other function, it just sets the plot moving, and then you should not concentrate on that, like Rosebud in Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane is not about Rosebud, although the film begins there. Citizen Kane is about Charles Foster Kane. That's how Orson Welles thought of it. So here, Antonio, not exactly a MacGuffin, but he sets the plot moving, but there are other major characters, one of whom is Bassanio. Bassanio is a very good friend of Antonio's. Well, he's somewhat of a wastrel, you know, a scoundrel in a way, not really, but he wastes money. He's up to his gills in debt, and he comes to Antonio, who has already lent him money once, and says, please lend me some more money. You know, will you give him money? He's already taken your money and he's wasted it. I could ask Mr. Shomin Chakrabarty, who is always in the habit of funding different people. Would you fund Bassanio? But Bassanio has an answer to that. He says that if you give me an arrow and I fire that arrow and I lose it, then what will I do? I will take another arrow from you and fire it in the same direction and follow that arrow, and then I will not only gain this arrow which I have seen falling, and also get the first arrow back. Brilliant logic. But why does he need money? He's up to his gills in debt. There is only one way he can save himself, and the reason is partly financial, economical, partly romantic, you know. In Belmont is a lady richly left, and she is fair and fairer than that word of wondrous virtues. Sometimes from her eyes I did receive fair speechless messages. Her name is Portia, nothing undervalued to Cato's daughter, Brutus's Portia. Nor is the wide world ignorant of her worth, for the four winds blow in from every coast renowned suitors, and her sunny locks hang on her temples like the golden fleece, and many Jasons come in quest of her. Oh, my Antonio, and I have but the means to hold a rival place with one of them. I have a mind presages me such thrift that I should questionless be fortunate. That's Bassanio for you. Now this speech has several interesting elements. One of them is the element of allusion. Shakespeare always uses allusion, intertextuality. He's talked of Belmont, which is where Portia lives. That's straight enough. But he's also talked about Jason or Jasons. And he's talked about the golden fleece, which Hermes gave to Phrixus. The golden fleece is much in demand. And it was Jason and the Argonauts who went to the island of Colchis to recover that much wanted golden fleece. So it is a symbol of Portia, the golden fleece. Shakespeare uses mythology. Bassanio wants the money because he needs some money to present himself at what we Indians would call a swayamvar, you know, much like the swayamvar that Arjuna attended in the Mahabharata, and and he fired that arrow from the opposite angle and got the bullseye so that he could actually claim Draupadi's hand. That all the brothers claimed Draupadi is, of course, a different story, which I'm not going to go into. The point is that Bassanio is going to take part in a competition for the hand of Portia, and for that he needs some money, because he has to be presentable. He's also saying that he's seen Portia, and he feels that maybe she would like him. He, of course, is enraptured by her, not just for her money, but because she's so beautiful and so accomplished. So he needs 3,000 ducats. So the second major character, Bassanio, after Antonio, who could easily be one of the protagonists, because in this play you don't have a single protagonist. But Antonio doesn't have the money. Although he's a very rich merchant, very established, all his money has been invested in ships. He's a shippy, what we would call a stevedore, And all the money has been invested, and all those ships have set sail. So he doesn't have even 3,000 ducats. What to do? Bassanio has a friend called Graciano, who's a kind of garrulous character, always playing the fool. And there's an actual fool in Merchant of Venice. By fool, I don't mean an idiot. By fool, I mean a clown. And the clown character is Launcelot Gobbo, who works for Shylock. Now, who is Shylock? Shylock is an alien. He doesn't actually belong to Venice. Venice is a very important word in this play of ours. Shakespeare has located more than one play in Venice and several plays in Italy. So Venice is a commercial place, and the main center, the kind of stock exchange or what you will, is the Rialto. And Shylock is a money lender. And so the mainstream Christians in Venice look down upon Shylock. A, because he's a moneylender. B, because he's an alien, doesn't belong to Venice. And C, because he is a Jew. But we need the 3,000 ducats, so they come to Shylock. Shylock says, 3,000 ducats. Well, for 3 months, well, Antonio shall be bound. Well, will you say something? Tell us something. Will you give us the money? What? Senor Antonio, many a time and often the Rialto you have rated me about my monies and my usances. Still have I borne it with a patient shrug, for sufferance is the badge of all our tribe. You call me misbeliever, cutthroat dog, and spit upon my Jewish gabardine. And all for use of that which is mine own. Go to them. You come to me and you say, Shylock, we would have monies. You say so. You that did void your realm upon my beard and spurn me as you spurn a stranger cur. Money is your suit. What should I say to you? Should I not say, hath a dog money? Is it possible a cur can lend 3,000 ducats? Or shall I bend low and with bated breath and whispering humbleness say this, fair sir, you spit on me on Wednesday last. You spurned me such a day. Another time you call me a dog. And for these courtesies, I lend you thus much monies? Obviously, Shylock is vitriolic, he's sarcastic, he's ironic, he's hitting back at Antonio and Bastardo. But he agrees to give the 3,000 ducats, that too without charging interest, which is strange. You know, normally he's a usurer. His income comes from interest, but he doesn't charge the interest. He says, okay, I will give you the money. You know, they were a little upset with his dialogue because he was really insulting them. And even Antonio said, I must like to call thee so again. If you don't like it, give it to your enemy. He says, okay. Don't get so het up. I will give you the money for 3 months and you don't have to give any interest. But as a joke, you know, just as a joke, we can write in the agreement that if you fail to give the money in 3 months, which I know you won't because Antonio is a good man, I'll take a pound of flesh from Antonio's nearest Antonio's heart. And they agree. It was a joke. He's not going to take a pound of flesh for heaven's sake. So, the contract is signed. Bassanio gets the money, keeping Antonio as guarantor, and he sets sail for Belmont, where he will present himself to Portia. Now, I was saying that Shakespeare has several interesting elements. One of the elements is structure. Shakespeare, in a sense, follows the Aristotelian structure. Now, what is that? Aristotle says that the traditional dramatic narrative structure should be in 5 acts, in 5 parts. Introduction, complication, crisis, climax, and resolution. And the great Greek playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides and Aeschylus, they all followed the 5-act structure. So does Shakespeare in a sense. Introduction is done with. Antonio, Bassanio, Graciano, Shylock. Now the complication, and there's a hint of the complication in the introduction itself, although you won't feel it. This signing of the contract, well, it could lead to something. So the hint of the complication, but now the complication will start, and some more characters. Shylock's daughter, Jessica, a very beautiful Jewess, is in love with a Christian, Lorenzo, and they're planning to elope. Bassanio has of course gone to Belmont, but the Swayamvar has started. And you know, people are coming. There's the County Palatine, there's Monsieur Le Bon, there is the Scotsman, there's the Prince of Morocco, there's the Prince of Aragon, some of whom Portia doesn't like, but she has no choice. Her father has fixed that whoever will win the Swayamvar will claim Portia. So Portia has no hand in this. What is the game? The game is that there are three caskets: golden casket, silver casket, leaden casket. And all of them have inscriptions. The golden casket, who chooseth me shall gain what many men desire. Silver casket, who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves. The leaden casket, who chooseth me must risk and hazard all he hath. Hazard means take a chance, you know, and you have to risk everything. Now, one of those caskets has the portrait of Portia. Those were the days when photography didn't exist, so it was actually a sketch or a painting, so it's a likeness. So if the suitor opens the casket which has her portrait, he gets Portia. So it might be someone whom Portia doesn't like, and that's why she's a little annoyed with her father for putting her through this ordeal. Anyway, the Prince of Morocco comes, and he of course is from Morocco, and he says, "Mislike me not for my complexion, the shadowed livery of the burnished sun, to whom I am a neighbor and near bred. Bring me any creature northward bound, where Phoebus's fire scarce thaws the icicles, and let us make incision for your love, to prove whose blood is reddest, his or mine." He's full of thespian bombast. He's an extremely solid character, and here again Shakespeare is venturing into issues of race and color. Way back the end of the 16th century and the beginning of the 17th century. We all know that William Shakespeare, I think his birth date is in a little bit of a doubt. He was born maybe on the 23rd of April or the 24th or 25th. He was baptized on a specific date in the 40s, that is the 1540s. But in about 1592, several of his plays were becoming popular. He was an actor. He was playing roles in a group. He belonged to a theatre group like Proscenium, let's say, or Bohupri. It was called All the King's Men. You know, because Queen Elizabeth died. Queen Elizabeth was a great patron of all of this. And then King James. And from all the Chamberlains' men, it became All the King's Men. So he was an actor, he was a director, he was a writer. And he wrote plays that were popular, and this is very important. All of these plays, be it Merchant of Venice, be it Hamlet, be it Othello, which is also set in Venice, by the way, they were popular plays. Plays for the majority, plays for the masses. But within that, there were always several levels. And why is Shakespeare still revered today? Why do people think that he's so important? That is precisely because within the framework of a very popular play, sometimes taken from legend, using elements like revenge and vengeance. Revenge is a very strong motif in many of Shakespeare's plays. He's able to express great philosophic truths. This is not the right place to speak about that, but I can just say in a line that in Hamlet, existentialism, although such a thing didn't exist at that time, is expressed in simpler terms. Even there are likenesses to Indian philosophy. The concept of Maya is very similar to the soliloquy of Macbeth's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, and so on. So Shakespeare is a difficult customer. He is brilliant, but difficult to handle, difficult to understand, difficult to portray, and then there's the mentality. Well, Bassanio comes after the Prince of Aragon has failed. The Prince of Morocco too has failed, He opened the golden casket. He thought that, who chooseth me will get what many men desire. Everyone desires Portia, so that should be the casket. But there was a skull inside. And an inscription there inside, a scroll. All that glisters is not gold. Often have you heard that told. Many a tomb do worms enfold. So that's the origin of the proverb. What we say, all that glitters is not gold. It was originally all that glisters is not gold. The Prince of Aragon was a very arrogant personality. Chooses the silver casket because he thinks he deserves Portia. Who chooseth me shall gain what he deserves. And he finds inside a fool's head. And he's dejected, devastated. He says, with one fool's head I came to woo, but I go away with two. That's Aragon, Bassanio. Now Portia actually does have a liking for Bassanio. She wants him to win. And Bassanio is extremely nervous. He says, I'm on the rack. Let me choose, let me choose. And Portia is speaking, trying to get him calm. Because he's going to make the choice. If he chooses the wrong casket, well, that's it. That's the end of the relationship. She decides to play a song. And that song is a kind of a clue. And so just before Bassanio has steeled his nerve and is about to choose, a song is played. Goes to choose the casket. And he says, So may the outward shows release themselves. The world is still deceived with ornament. In law, what plea so tainted and corrupt, but being seasoned with a gracious voice, obscures the show of evil? In religion, what damned error, but some sober brow will come and bless it with a text hiding the grossness with fair ornament. There is no vice so simple but assumes the mark of virtue on his outer parts. How many cowards, whose hearts are all as false as stairs of sand, wear yet upon their chins the beards of Hercules and frowning Mars, who inward searched have livers white as milk, and these assume but valor's excrement to render them redoubted. Look on beauty, and you shall find 'tis purchased by the weight, which therein works a miracle in nature, making them lightest that wear the most of it. So also those crisped, snaky, golden locks that make such wanton gambols with the wind, often known to be the dowry of a second head, the skull that bred them in the sepulchre. Thus ornament is but the guiled shore to a most dangerous sea. The beautiful scarf veiling an Indian beauty. The cunning times that seem truth puts on to ensnare the wisest. Therefore thou gaudy gold, hard food for Midas, I will none of thee, nor thee, thou pale and common drudge tweed man in man. But thou meager lead, that rather threatenest than dost promise aught, thy paleness moves me more than eloquence. And here choose I, joy be the consequence. He opens the casket, and there's Portia's portrait. So he wins the hand of Portia. But this long deliberation is also extremely interesting. And here also he uses allusions, intertextuality. One is a very common allusion, Midas, you might be knowing. It's from Greek mythology. The king who was given a boon that whatever he touched would turn to gold. This was a boon, but it turned to be a curse when he touched his food and that too turned into gold. He touched his daughter and she too became frozen gold. So it was a curse really. And that's why he says hard food for Midas. And once he chooses, Portia is delighted. She's also in ecstasy. And at this point of moment, the crisis occurs. Introduction, complication, crisis. In this entire process of, going to Belmont, staying there, playing the game, winning the game, staying with Portia, the 3 months have elapsed. And Antonio's ships have all failed. And Shylock is baying for his blood. And he's doing that for several reasons. One of the reasons is that his daughter, Jessica, has eloped with the Christian Lorenzo. Just as the Christians detest Shylock, Shylock too holds a grudge against the Christians. So this is a disaster. Double disaster. He's very fond of his money and his jewelry. The daughter has decamped with most of his jewelry, particularly an ornament which he had given to his wife Leah. And somebody reports to him, and that is his friend Tubal, that that beautiful necklace was adorning a monkey somewhere. So he's really, really furious. And finally, of course, Antonio has failed to pay the money within the 3 months. So he says, well, Antonio has to be arrested, and he is. He's in jail. And there is going to be a trial, and since the contract has been drawn up, Antonio is going to lose a pound of flesh from closest his heart. When Shylock is asked, what is that pound of flesh going to be useful for? He says, to bait fish withal. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He had disgraced me and hindered me $500,000. Laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, heated my friends, cooled my enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? Fed with the same food? Hurt by the same weapons, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why revenge? The villainy you teach me I will execute. And it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. A letter to this effect comes to Bassanio, and that's written by Antonio. Antonio says, if my love does not allow you to come, let not your love, if our friendship, does not allow you to come because you are now involved with your wife, then please don't come. But that's a plaintive call. Bassanio rushes. He has to do something, otherwise Shylock will take the pound of flesh. The whole thing is heard by Portia, and she also says, Bassanio, please go immediately. And Bassanio leaves for Venice. Now, Portia has heard all of this, and having heard this, she's making her own plans, kind of a parallel action. And all this is in the crisis. This is a serious crisis. Antonio may lose his life. What does Portia do? She is a very accomplished lady and a doctor of law. She goes to her mentor, Dr. Bellario of Padua, and takes advice how to deal with this case, and then comes disguised as a man, Balthazar, to the Venetian court, where the principal adjugator is the Duke or the Doge. Now, here's another element. I talked about racism, but now there's the gender bender. A woman playing a man. You know that in theatre, men used to play women, and in Bengal too, that happened. The only exception being Lebedov. He was actually able to get women to play women, but mostly in the early days of Bangla theatre, it was the men playing the women. Here you have a woman playing a man. And the only comparison I can think of is the great Noti Vinodini. Noti Vinodini, Sri Chaitanya Rupe এসেছিলেন এবং গিরিশ ঘোষ সেই নাটকটি দেখেছিলেন এবং গিরিশ তাকে শিক্ষিত দীক্ষিত করে রামকৃষ্ণ দেবকে আমন্ত্রণ জানিয়েছিলেন, রামকৃষ্ণ এসেছিলেন, and that's why the British said a saint in the house of Satan. What will Balthazar do in the fourth act, which is the climax? Now, Shylock is hell-bent on claiming the pound of flesh. Portia tries to reason with him. Portia addresses Balthazar. Nobody can recognize her because she's a him now. Bassanio says, I'll pay you the money 3 times over. Shylock will not be moved. And then finally, Portia appeals to Shylock. And Balthazar or Portia says, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. Becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, an attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sits the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. An earthly power doth then show likest God's, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. We all do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follow, this strict court of Venice must give sentence against the merchant there. Thus spake Balthazar Portia. But Shylock is unmoved. He says, I want my bond. He will not hear of mercy or anything. He is hell-bent on claiming the pound of flesh. So Portia takes the permission of the Duke to say that, well, get the instruments ready and please take the pound of flesh from nearest Antonio's heart. Everyone is in a tizzy, what to do. Graciano, the friend of Bassanio, a very garrulous character, and he insults Shylock, says that don't sharpen your knife on your soul. He says, not on thy soul, but on thy soul. Meaning that his soul is so jagged that you can sharpen a knife on it. But Shylock is unmoved. He will have the pound of flesh. So the balance is brought, the instrument of amputation is brought, and just as the amputation is about to take place, Portia says, remember, Jew, one thing, that your contract clearly says that you will take a pound of flesh closest to Antonio's heart. It should not be even a little more than a pound of flesh, and it should not be even a little less. If this were modern times, we'd say not even a micrometer more. And also, you ask for a pound of flesh. There is no mention of blood, so you cannot shed even a drop of blood. So take the pound of flesh, but let it be just a pound of flesh, and there should be no blood. What will Shylock do? He can't take the pound of flesh. He's caught in a double bind. That is the brain and the intellect of Balthazar or Portia. Shylock says, okay, give me the money, let it pay twice over and I'll take it, or 3 times over. He says, wait, Jew, the Duke says, and Portia, that your taking of the pound of flesh, or your intent to take the pound of flesh, is a kind of attempt to murder. It's a conspiracy, because if the pound of flesh is taken, he's going to die. And you have planned this. Therefore, you will not get your principal even, and your entire property is confiscated by the state. And half of it will go to the aggrieved party, you know. And the other half will be kept by us. And Shylock is devastated, you know. The so-called antagonist is broken. And then one more important pronouncement, which completely shatters him. You, Shylock, have to change your religion from Judaism to Christianity. Shylock says, I am not well, send a deed after me. Now the question may arise at this point of time. Antonio is saved, everything has happened perfectly, everyone lives happily ever after, but Shylock, is he a sinner? Or is he more sinned against than sinning? Do you not think that the punishment given to Shylock is a little too harsh? It's a point of debate. And many critics have talked about this. That Shylock is a strange character with multiple shades. Is he more sinned against than sinning? Shakespeare leaves it open and goes into the final act, the fifth act, introduction, complication, crisis, climax, resolution. The fifth act begins with music, and it's very light. And there's Lorenzo and Jessica, who have eloped and gone to Belmont. And Lorenzo, in that night, you know, he says, in such a night as this, when the sweet wind did gently kiss the trees, and they did make no noise, in such a night, Troilus, methinks, mounted the Trojan walls, and sighed his soul towards the Grecian tents, where Cressid lay that night. This time, the allusion is to Troilus and Cressida, another play based on legend again, the Trojan War, star-crossed lovers, one on the side of Troy and one on the side of Greece. That's how the fifth act begins, and they talk about many things, about music, the music of the spheres, and then Bassanio and Antonio come, but not before Portia and Nerissa come. Nerissa is the maid to Portia. Portia is married to Bassanio. Nerissa and Graciano have got attracted to each other, and they're married too. So they come, and Portia and Nerissa tell Lorenzo and Jessica not to inform anyone that they had gone anywhere. So Bassanio and Antonio do not know that it's Portia who has actually saved them. Now, as soon as Bassanio comes back, he's, of course, infatuated with Portia, and he says, we should have day with the Antipodes if you would walk in absence of the sun. Meaning the Antipodes are those places which are the diametric opposite of where you are. For example, if this is India, the Antipodes would be West Indies. You see, both the West Indies and India would have light if you were there, meaning that she is like the sun. So Portia hears that and says, let me give light, but let me not be light, for a light wife doth make a heavy husband. So Shakespeare is witty as ever, using word play. And then Portia very casually says, where's your ring? I don't see the ring on your finger. Flashback. What happened was that after Balthazar had rescued Antonio, Bassanio had gone to Balthazar and said, will you accept some kind of a token, you know, an honorarium or anything you want? And Balthazar said, no, I don't want anything. Please take something. We feel bad if you don't take anything. Well, if you really want to give me something, give me that ring on your finger. Bassanio says, well, take anything, take my life even, but don't take this ring. Fine man you are. You asked me whether I wanted something, want to give me something when I wanted to take it. You're refusing, you're fine sort of a man, don't do it again. And Balthazar is storming out when Bassanio has to, he just has to give that ring. Similarly, Graciano has to give his ring to the clerk, who is actually Nerissa in disguise. So both of them are without their rings. And now Portia says, I don't see the ring on your finger, where is it? And he cannot say anything, and Portia is very violent. He says, you have given it to some woman, you know. I will never warm your bed as long as you don't have that ring. And then Antonio, who's there, who's a little embarrassed, he says, I am the unhappy subject of these quarrels. And then Portia says to him, don't worry, you are very well here. Actually, I was Balthazar. It was I who pleaded your case. And then they heave a sigh of relief, you know. So that's done, and everyone is happy, and everything ends happily ever after. But there's that one question of Shylock. The play ends with Graciano's line. He says, as long as I live, I'll fear no other thing so sore as keeping safe Nerissa's ring. He ends with a couplet. But Shakespeare is Shakespeare because through this tale, which has many subplots like the Lorenzo Jessica story, the pound of flesh story, the ring story, the casket story, he is able to conjure up a world of passionate characters, very popular, but also talking about values, about gender, about race, which is why Shakespeare's influence, even today, remains, and his plays keep getting performed, and he is always present and with us, and we continue to look at Shakespeare and see that his influence goes on and on and on and on and on.
आप सभी ने मोबाइल फोन ऑफ रखा, तो पता चल गया कि आप नाट्य प्रेमी हैं, और थैंक यू सर। नाटक में नाटक की चर्चा सभी ने देखा है, इस प्ले को पढ़ा है, सुना है, जाना है बहुत अच्छी तरह से, पर जिस तरह से इसकी आज प्रस्तुति हुई है वो अशोक जी कर सकते हैं कि हम नाटक देखते हुए भी नाटक को समझ रहे हैं, जान रहे हैं, महसूस कर रहे हैं और हर पात्र को जी रहे हैं। आंखों के सामने सब कुछ सामने सजीव होता है, और यह सिर्फ और सिर्फ सर आपने किया। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। तालियों के साथ